Hi, how are you? Mark McGuinness. Thanks for joining me today on another little webcast, another power session. And of course, if you're new to these power sessions, what we do here is give you as much information as quickly as we can. So instead of doing things like a 1 hour webinar, we cut this right down to 15, 20 minutes, bump out a whole bunch of ideas for you to go back and start working on your business or in your sales role. So this particular program is a recording of a session that we ran on the 30th of July, 2021. And we're talking about the 5 mistakes most people are making when they're building out their pipeline. So, of course, pipeline is very, very popular. Most salespeople will tell you that their biggest challenge is not having enough leads, and that they're focused on finding new clients. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and about some of the challenges that we see people having and the mistakes that they're making. So when I'm out there training clients, regardless of where they are, whether they're in the UK, the US, here in APAC, we generally come across the same types of challenges. And whilst the messaging that we have and the way that we interact with those prospects and clients are the same, is different, the challenges that people have are the same. So what I'm going to share is hopefully a few bits and pieces that you'll be able to take away and change the way that you do things for the better, or at least make you have a really good think about that. So the first thing that I want to talk about, which is probably the most controversial here, is that we should be thinking about measuring our pipelines and talking about our pipelines less around volume. So how much have we got in our pipeline, and more around velocity. And the reason, and of course, okay, if you have no volume at all, well, then you have to be focused on volume, right? So if you have no leads in your pipeline, then of course you need to be measuring the volume. But that's not really how most people operate. So typically what we see is lots and lots of people have got deals in their pipeline and they're measured on 3, 5, or 7 times coverage, right? So if you need to make $1 million in a year, then you would need to have $3 or $5 million worth of opportunities in your pipeline, because the theory is you won't close all of those. And if you don't have enough opportunities, well, then of course you won't close. And that rings true to a point. But if our pipeline meetings and our pipeline conversations are simply around volume, we're saying, Mark, have you got $3 million worth of deals in your pipeline? Yes, I do. Tick. Thank you very much. Off you go. What I think we should be talking about is measuring the velocity, like how fast and how frequently are deals coming into the pipeline, and are they moving through the pipeline? So are they moving mid-funnel, then late funnel? What deals are stalled, and what do we need to do on top of that? So volume's easy to measure. It's also easy to fudge, right? So what I mean by that is, if you've got 1 or 2 really big deals in a pipeline that needs to have $1 million, for example, if you've got 2 or 3 $200,000 deals, then whilst you might pass the coverage test, you've actually got a pretty weak and anemic pipeline. So, and I think it's really hard for sales leaders to coach velocity. So what they do is they default to volume. So volume coaching is really easy. Oh, Mark, go out and get some more deals. What we need to see is an extra $150,000 worth of deals in your pipeline this month. Come back for our next pipeline meeting and let's see how you go. Where the reality is, if you say, look, let's have a look at these deals. Which ones haven't moved for the last 30 days? Which ones haven't moved for the last 60 days? What are we going to do to try and move those? What do we need to do that? And of course, that's much harder to coach. That's a tougher conversation, and it takes more time and more input from the sales manager. And that's why I think there's this overarching focus on volume. Of course, the sales manager needs to report up. So they're going back to the CEO and saying, hey, Mr. CEO, look, great news. I've spoken to the sales team. Everyone's got their 5 times coverage. So based on that, we can forecast that in 90 days, these deals are going to close. Now, if the pipeline's not really moving, then that's not the case. So what we're doing is we're creating a situation where reps hoard deals. So they're reluctant to move them out. And when you think about how sales reps typically manage their pipeline every week, what they do is or every month, is they sit in front of their computer, they open up their pipeline, their CRM, and they think, okay, what deals have I got in here and which ones can I press the button on? So if you've got deals in there that you're reluctant to let go or that aren't moving, you spend some time, depending on what the deal is, but you spend some time on trying to make each one of those deals move through the pipeline. if we were more deliberate about getting rid of some of these deals, it'd be easy for us to then focus on the deals that actually are going to move, rather than trying to allocate X amount of hours of prospecting time. And we know that salespeople only spend about 30% of their time on sales activities. So if you use that as a benchmark, people are spending about 12 hours a week in total focused on activities, on sales activities. How much of that is at the front of the funnel? Depends on whether they're full cycle or prospecting orientated. But let's say they're full cycle. They might be spending as little as 3 or 4 hours a week on prospecting tasks or moving deals through the early part of the pipeline. If that's the case, and you've got 10 deals in there and 3 of them are rubbish deals, and then you're spending very few minutes. So what's that? 4 hours times by 6 is 240 minutes. If you divide that by 10, so you're spending 24 minutes on each deal. That's not a lot of time per week. And if 3 of those are actually never going to move and they're just stuck in your pipeline, then what you're talking about is about an hour and a half of wasted time, and a significant amount of that, and that's 30% of your total prospecting time. So what I'm suggesting is, if we focused on velocity, what deals are moving in, what deals are moving through the pipeline, what deals are moving out of the pipeline, it's going to be much easier for us to actually get great results, assuming that we're not coming off a baseline of 0 volume. And imagine a scenario, right, where you've got 2 times coverage, for example, and you're not allowed to put in any more deals until you take one out. So I find a great deal. I go and find a fantastic potential customer, but I can't put them into my pipeline unless I close or remove. So close one or close lost another deal in my pipeline. And I think, if you thought about that as a process, as a challenge, and that's pretty challenging for a lot of people. But what you'd find is that if we know that a sales rep can only manage a certain amount of activities, a certain amount of prospects in their pipeline or opportunities in their pipeline, and that number is 12, 10, it doesn't matter what it is, 110. Let's say we've reached that number. 12 is the most amount of opportunities that I can manage. Look, I've gone and found a great opportunity. I can't put that in, because if I put that in, that'll be 13, that'll be too many. So in order for me to put this opportunity in, I have to get rid of one of the others. Which opportunity would I get rid of? I'd get rid of the opportunity that was the weakest or the least likely. And then what I need to do is then make an evaluation. The deal that I'm about to take out of my pipeline versus the deal I'm about to put in, which one, it's the deal I'm about to put in better than the one I'm about to take out? If not, then it won't go in. If so, then I delete or remove, close lost, hopefully close lost, the weakest deal. So what does that do with my pipeline quality over time? Drastically increases the quality of my pipe. And assuming that we can manage the velocity, then you're going to have better quality deals moving through your pipeline more often, which is what sales managers and businesses really need. Not a crazy measurement around whether you're 3, 5, 7, or 9 times your pipeline, but your quota. Okay, so and the second mistake people are making, quite frankly, is trying to sell to people who simply won't buy. And your pipeline really should be like the Australian cricket team. So if you follow cricket, it's very, very hard to get into the cricket team. But once you get into the cricket team, it's almost impossible to get dropped. You need to have a really bad run of form. And I'm suggesting that our pipeline should be considered the same way. What's our qualification process to get people into the pipeline? Lots of people talk about qualification further down the order, to keep using a cricketing term. When they get into the pipeline and they start qualifying, etc. I think we should be qualifying earlier, make it really hard for people to get into your pipeline, make sure they really are your ideal clients. And then, once they're in, we work them pretty hard to make sure that they either convert one lost or closed one, closed lost. And one of the ways that we can do this is, as sales leaders or even as individuals, is keep using your ICP in your pipeline meetings. And because what I see is that ICP is talked about a lot as a prospecting tool, but as soon as somebody comes into our pipeline, we forget to review that. This means that we end up with deals that are very unlikely to close in our pipeline. And a good example to explain this is, if you think about your average deal, and let's say your average deal is $10,000. why have you got, you know, a massive enterprise deal in there with a value of $200,000 or $300,000? It doesn't make sense, you know. And the way that you sell, the way that you're set up to sell, the way that you're going to market is based around a $10,000 solution. And yet you're being blinded by the lights of, you know, someone like Woolworths, for example, that want to offer a $350,000, you know, there's a $350,000 deal, $350,000 opportunity. What that's doing is then slowing that salesperson down. That deal is unlikely to progress. If it does progress, then fantastic, but it's unlikely on the balance of probability. So therefore, we waste a lot of time trying to sell to somebody who's actually not going to buy. And we see this all the time. So what should we do instead? We should take those massive elephants and put them somewhere else. So maybe they go onto the CEO, or maybe they go into a different sales bucket, and don't slow that salesperson down. So, and this is assuming that our ICP, you know, our average sale is $10,000. Okay. If our average sale, if we're an enterprise sales rep and we're selling for $350,000, then we shouldn't have any $50,000 sales in our pipeline. So it works in reverse as well. You know, so are we using ICP to keep making sure that we've got the right people in our pipeline to make sure that they're the people that are going to be most likely to progress? Because what I see time and time again is people getting blinded by the numbers and putting obstacles, what they think is opportunities, in their pipeline. Mistake number 3 by far is the very low quality of messaging that people are using to try and engage their prospects. So we need to be entering into a conversation as a peer. So as leaders, we need to be arming our salespeople to hold a conversation that has real business outcomes. And if you're having conversations with your salespeople around the sales floor or in your sales meetings that's focused on you, your results, your pipeline, your activity, then guess what your salespeople are probably going to take back out to the marketplace? Same sort of stuff, right? So what we need to be doing as sales leaders is we need to role model the behavior that we want to see. And that's, you know, talking about business outcomes, talking about, you know, getting case studies, talking about how we've solved real problems, what the business outcomes were for those clients, so that enables our salespeople to get out there and have those real business conversations. Why is that important? Because if we enter into conversations or we reach out to people using the language about, you know, we're the number one supplier, what I want to do is get 15 minutes in your diary, we're coming across as being a spammy Sammy. And we don't want to do that because it's really easy for people to just delete. Whereas if we enter into a conversation as a peer up here, instead of, you know, down here begging for a meeting, we're up here, equal, the conversation is going to be more valuable for the buyer. Conversation is going to be easier for us. And this can only happen, again, if we go back to that last piece, if we're selling inside our ICP. So it's going to be very difficult for a salesperson who sells a $10,000 solution to be able to hold a high quality value conversation with the buyer of Woolworths of a $350,000 solution. And so you can see how these things start to become entwined a little bit. So having just one conversation point, powerfully made, works across the entire prospecting funnel, right? So you're better off having one really good conversation point, one really good pain point, one really good piece of relevance to make it easier for people to be able to engage with you. The fourth piece, the fourth mistake that we see people make all the time is they just rest on their laurels and they use outbound strategies that simply don't work. We all know how outbound happens now. We all know how conversations supposedly get started now, right? So you get an email that's typically automated. Maybe if it's very good, you don't know that it's automated. It lands in your inbox. 2 days later, you get a follow-up email that says, "Hey, Mark, you know, just checking in, thoughts. Did you notice this? Whatever," right? And then 2 or 3 days later, we get a third email that says, "Hey, maybe I've caught you at a bad time. Now doesn't look like it's a great time. I'll call you back in 6 months," or something. And we all know that you probably won't call them back in 6 months because it's just an automated email. So, you know, using email as your main method to reach out to start a conversation with your buyer is not going to position you as a peer. So if I wanted to reach out to talk to you and I had something of real value, then I would definitely be multi-threading you. I would definitely be reaching out across multiple channels. if I needed to speak to you, if I had something of value, then I would probably send an email. That's true. I would probably go to your social media profile, have a view at that, see if you're active there, reach out there if I could, reference the fact that I'd sent you an email. I would definitely call you. You probably wouldn't answer because you wouldn't know my number, but that's okay. But I would leave a voicemail and say, hey, look, it's Mark. I've just sent you an email. Look, keen to have a conversation due to X. Hit me back if you can. Otherwise, I'll reach out tomorrow. And I'd probably even fire off a text message. Right. So at that point, you're going, well, this is not like every other interaction. So you're creating a pattern interrupt for people to start a conversation. But you can only do this if you've got the right narrative. Because if you then pick up the telephone and I say, oh, look, I just wanted to get 15 minutes in your diary to tell you about how great our products were, then you're spam, which is like what we talked about last time, last session, last slide. And if you're spamming, you're out. So the narrative needs to be solid. And if you've got a really strong narrative, that gives you the right to do a genuine multi-thread, multi-channel outreach. And then we can meet our buyers where they are and start a conversation as a peer. All right, so where are we? Last one. Okay, giving up too early. So this is pretty exciting. I've actually got some really great stuff to share with you. So having been using the tactical pipeline growth methodology across multiple businesses across multiple continents. So we've been doing that now for over a year. And we've been doing that in the UK during COVID, during lockdown, US, and of course across APAC. And what we're finding is some really exciting stuff. So you'll be familiar with that phrase, you need 12 to 15 pieces of outreach to start a conversation. What we're seeing is when you use these systems together is you actually get responses in 4 to 6 attempts, which is pretty exciting. So it means that we can actually do that because nobody's going to reach out 12 to 15 times without being a pest. But you can certainly have 4 to 6 attempts in a authentic peer-to-peer driven way. And we're seeing already that this is the case. So one of my recent clients, BDM in Perth, for example, was adding 5 to 10 prospects per week into the top of the funnel to build out her pipeline, start a conversation. And what we're finding, we're getting 75%. So three out of 4 were reaching a conversation at 4th attempt. Okay. So that was at the end of the second week. So 2 attempts per week. Each attempt had 2 or 3 channels. So just like that example I used before. So maybe LinkedIn, email, phone call, for example. And after doing that 4 times, we had a conversation 75% of the time, and 66% of those were responding saying, yep, let's have a conversation or share some more information with me. So, very few people were saying, no, go away. That's not interesting. And that's because of the quality of the conversation that we spoke about. I think it was in mistake number 3. So this is pretty exciting. There's no real reason for us not to be building high quality pipeline. Most people are telling us that pipeline building is their biggest challenge. And I'm saying it doesn't need to be if you break up with these 5 mistakes. Focus on velocity. Let's go back through this to make it easy for you. Focus on velocity, not volume. Okay, make sure that the clients that are in your pipeline have got the right OCP and you're not trying to sell people who don't buy it, and you're allowing enough time for you to focus on the deals that you need to move ahead, and you're qualifying people out, maybe even 1 in, 1 out. Controversial. Make sure that you've got the right narrative that you're taking into these conversations. Don't be a spammy Sammy. Make sure you're talking about what's important to them and their business needs, their business challenges. You're training your team on how to have those conversations. We're going across multiple channels and we're sticking with it long enough. That's the takeaway that we need to do. If you do these 5 steps, okay, you're going to be in the top 5% of B2B sellers that I can see on the planet, because what I'm seeing is most people aren't doing one of these. So if you do 5 of these, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. All right. So, like this, if so, and you're not already part of the club, come and join my twice monthly mailer. So every fortnight, once every 2 weeks, I send out an email to my VIP database, and I share a couple of really strong sales tactics that they can use. Takes you about 4 minutes to read. It's only a couple of 100 words. No spam, No BS, just great value. You can sign up by just going to markmc.co, and that's the best way to stay across all of my latest sales tactics. Hope you enjoyed the 5 pipeline building mistakes that you're making in 2021, and hope to see you on another POW session sometime soon. Ciao.